Michael Saylor wrecks Bitcoin. What is going on? Does Bitcoin affect Michael Saylor stock, or do we have something called reflexivity where Michael Saylor's stocks start affecting Bitcoin? What's reflexivity? What are Michael Saylor's stocks? Who is Michael Saylor and what is he trying to do? People need to understand this because it's driving all of crypto. Stay tuned for more. This is the Market Update. I am your host, Bill Noble. If you need a roadmap in crypto, subscribe to this channel. Turn on alerts so you know when we're going live. And if the content works for you, hit the like button. All right. So we're going to do Michael Saylor. We're going to do Micron earnings, right? Semiconductor earnings. And we're going to have a little word about the dollar. So Bitcoin, as of right now, is $59,000. So Bitcoin is below 60K. Everybody is very upset. Do they know why they're upset? I mean, NASDAQ is doing okay because a big semiconductor company had blowout earnings. Shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, it was great for the company, great for NASDAQ, but you know, the rally's pretty much getting sold. Pretty much. But NASDAQ isn't down. So NASDAQ isn't hurting Bitcoin. And Bitcoin and crypto, which has already lost half of its value and making a lot of people like really depressed. You know, crypto has lost half of its value. And, you know, as one guy said, appropriately, if you're wondering what a bear market looks like, this is it. Peak Doomerism right now. This is where diamond hands are forged. Absolutely, absolutely true. Because, you know, crypto is transitioning from, I think, depression to revulsion, where people just can't stand it anymore. And they're giving up on the asset class, which could not be more wrong. So everybody is associating Michael Saylor with FTX, I think. In other words, they think that whatever he's doing is going to blow up the crypto market. I think somewhat differently. I think what's happening is it's going to blow up the stocks and the preferred stocks that he's issued. Now, could that result in selling of Bitcoin? Theoretically, yes. Of course it can. Can they fully liquidate him? No. Now, what is really ironic is that Bitcoin whales somehow are hoping that Michael Saylor gets, I don't know, destroyed so they can get to buy Bitcoin at 35 or 44K. So I saw 44K on CoinDesk probably for the third or fourth time. So that's kind of becoming a consensus downside target, which is funny because, you know, nobody thought Bitcoin was going to go below, I want to say 70. Now it's at 60 and everybody is talking 44, down another 30%. Now, what is ironic about this is that everyone has forgotten about the dollar, right? The dollar is up, which probably helped start this decline in Bitcoin. It definitely got gold going to the downside. But this is the Secretary of the Treasury admitting that the reason that they went into Iran at a big picture level was to eventually make peace and get the Iranians back trading oil in US dollars and not the Chinese currency. So they escalated to de-escalate and get them back selling oil in dollars. It says, the tweet says, we invaded to support the USD. Said that out loud. So the problem with the dollar is that it is going lower and they are going to have to print. We're coming out with a big video about this. Yet people continue to sell Bitcoin. People just continue to sell. Now, I think in order to explain this correctly, we have to identify what the real risks are with Bitcoin. So Michael Saylor has done a couple of things, right? He's issued certain stocks, and those stocks are going down so hard that, again, it's impacting Bitcoin, and we have what's called a reflexivity loop. So let's talk about it. Let's go through Michael Saylor and the Bitcoin debacle, soup to nuts, as guys like me say, from beginning to end. All right. So MicroStrategy, or Strategy, his company, was founded in 1989. All right. Michael Saylor himself is an MIT engineer. He tried to make Strategy work as a software company. He tried like literally everything in the book to support the stock of the company, and he just couldn't fight Microsoft in Silicon Valley. So in 2020, when interest rates went to zero, he was like, you know what? This is stupid. I'm an engineer. I'm discovering Bitcoin. Following that, he just started to accumulate. He would issue his common stock, like, hey, anybody want to buy any of this common stock? And he would just sell more of his regular stock, kind of like what SpaceX did, except not an IPO, not an initial public offering. He would just offer more shares of MicroStrategy, and it was great because, you know, Bitcoin would go up and he would issue more stock, and his stock was the original Bitcoin ETF. In other words, before the Bitcoin ETF, if you couldn't get involved in any other Bitcoin product or Bitcoin, your only choice was his stock, MSTR. So that worked out great. And then he came up with all kinds of catchy things to say and became like the Bitcoin spokesperson. For example, he says, you know, Bitcoin is digital energy. In other words, you take energy, electricity, and you turn it into Bitcoin, stores the energy, and that energy becomes money. He believes Bitcoin is the apex asset, better than gold, better than real estate, better than bonds, and intends to hold it forever. Right. And he's done all these comparisons about how long a gold bar lasts. And, you know, Bitcoin is this digital asset, will literally last forever with scarcity value. Then at Bitcoin Vegas in 2026, I was there. He publicly claimed that he's extracting dollars from the fiat system and putting into Bitcoin permanently using something called Stretch, or STRC. So he engineered this instrument. It's called a preferred stock. It's the biggest one ever, and it's the biggest preferred stock out there by a mile. So he built this thing and offered an 11% interest rate. So in other words, you give him money, he buys Bitcoin, and I'll give you 11% interest. Now, where does he get the money to pay all that interest? Well, he assumes from rising Bitcoin, right? He can just continue to peel off Bitcoin as it goes up and cover the dividend. Well, guess what? Bitcoin's going the other way. And this particular, you know, stretch has collapsed, right? It's like the problem isn't the Bitcoin he owns. It's the obligation and the debt that he has that he's used to accumulate the Bitcoin. That the instruments that he's issued are absolutely collapsing. So here's how he thinks, right? He's trying to raise capital with things like Stretch, STRC, right? And, you know, he market buys Bitcoin because Bitcoin is going up, and Bitcoin is, you know, that's the value proposition of Bitcoin outside it being sound, scarce money. The number goes up. So, you know, every dollar raised is converted to Bitcoin. The stack grows. Bitcoin per share metric, we'll talk about that, rises, and Saylor calls this Bitcoin yield. In other words, the more Bitcoin he can buy, right, and keep his shares relatively fixed, you're getting more Bitcoin per share of stock. So he made up this metric called Bitcoin yield. And a lot of people are like, that's a nice way of saying he's like diluting his shareholders really to buy more Bitcoin. But there is no such thing as Bitcoin yield. It's a theoretical concept, right? So his thinking is, as Bitcoin rises, the value of his stocks will rise, allowing him to, to essentially borrow more and more money. The dividends will be funded by either more shares, right? In other words, the way to pay off the debt on the shares is to issue more shares. Scary, right? That's borderline. That's why people call it a Ponzi. It's not a Ponzi, but that's what's scary, right? The way you pay your debt holders is to issue more debt. That's Uncle Sugar's trick. Okay. He's not planning on doing Bitcoin sales. He's just adding more. He's planning to add more debt as Bitcoin goes up. That's when STRC was trading at par or 100. It is now at 78, giving general public and retail investors, most likely old people who were looking for that 11% dividend to live on, they're destroyed. I mean, they're still getting the dividend as of now, but they're down 22%. Now, like I said, STRC only works when, the premium holds. Like when Michael Saylor stock is super exciting, or STRC is trading at 100 or 101. That's the only way it works. So all of the things that, Saylor has all these metrics, and we're not going to go into all this stuff, but he's got like Bitcoin yield, Bitcoin gain, Bitcoin per share. He's invented all these metrics, right? He's like writing his own finance textbook. Like Bitcoin yield is Bitcoin acquired per share by issuing shares, not yield in any traditional sense. It's measuring dilution efficiency, meaning how much can you issue, then buy Bitcoin before Bitcoin rises. Bitcoin gain obviously is the change in his Bitcoin holdings. It ignores what he paid for the Bitcoin, right? And dividend obligations. And then there's Bitcoin per share, Bitcoin balance divided by shares outstanding. It rises when Bitcoin goes up and ignores the debt stack. It ignores how he got the money and how all that works. So, I was there. I was there when he went through all this, and we were all like, oh, wow. He just wowed everybody. And then, now he's getting kicked in the teeth by a very specific, not new, non-Fugazi term called reflexivity. Now, what is reflexivity? It's a theory that explains what is happening to strategy stock, STRC, and Bitcoin. This was invented by, George Soros, the not nice man himself. Okay. And, he's a hedge fund legend, before he turned not so nice, he was a hedge fund legend. Right. And, he founded this theory in the alchemy of finance. And the core insight is market prices, okay, are not passive reflections of reality. They don't reflect what we think is going to happen in the future. That's what the finance textbook says. Reflexivity actively creates the reality. It doesn't anticipate it. It creates it. Okay. It's a feedback loop where investors' perceptions of an asset affect the fundamentals of the asset. In other words, I'm bullish, therefore the fundamentals are good. It's going up, therefore the fundamentals are good. Or it's going down, therefore the fundamentals are bad. And news media does this, right? It goes down, they wrap the bearish narrative around it, everyone gets depressed and thinks it's going to 44K. When the fact is, it's a self-reinforcing cycle in both directions. So when it goes up, the fundamentals get better. People perceive it as better. They buy. Same thing on the downside. It goes down. Everybody gets negative because it's down. A negative story gets invented. People believe the negative story, and that perpetuates, right? So the negative loop is price falls, confidence falls, fewer buyers, price falls further, and it's self-reinforcing to the downside. Soros says the participants' perceptions do not correspond to the actual state of affairs. There's a two-way reflexive connection between perception and reality, which can give rise to this initially self-reinforcing, but eventually self-defeating boom and bust process. In other words, you get these wild moves based on how people feel in the moment, not actual reality. And not my favorite guy, but this is exactly what's happening, because it used to be Bitcoin would go up or down. Saylor's instruments would go up or down. That's MSTR and STRC. Now it's the reverse. MSTR and STRC are going down. There's no bid. They're going down 10% every day. And that is now affecting Bitcoin to the point where people are inventing a story that there's going to be some kind of massive Saylor liquidation of Bitcoin. It's not going to be a massive liquidation, but no one cares. No one cares because that's what people believe. That's the self-reinforcing doom loop. Specifically, the Bitcoin price falls, the stocks fall, MSTR and STRC, right? Those stocks are no longer exciting. No one buys them. Everyone sells them. Saylor can't raise any more money. And any new interest, or any new issuance or any new borrowing becomes completely cost prohibitive. He can't do it. He absolutely cannot do it anymore. He cannot borrow any more money. So the only way to pay the interest on his debt is to sell Bitcoin, which is why Bitcoin is falling apart. NASDAQ and tech stocks have kind of reflexivity the other way. Okay. In other words, the FOMO over there is exactly the opposite of the FOMO of the despair in crypto. Like they're buying into chips. They're buying into all these narratives. AI is forever. Everything in AI is perfect. They have positive reflexivity, which, as we've discussed in multiple streams, makes almost no sense. None. Okay. Zero. But they're doing it anyway. And this Bitcoin story makes no sense, right? Because, Bitcoin can go down, but cannot be broken. You can't, Bitcoin can go to zero, but Bitcoin can bounce off zero. Now, MicroStrategy and this company and all these debt instruments, they're centralized. They're centralized entities. And you would need Bitcoin at like 30K, and NASDAQ to fall 50%, according to some super smart guy that I know, really, in order to get this guy out. And this is, it's not the hunt for Red October, the movie. It's the hunt to get Michael Saylor out. Like, this is the trade. This is the new excuse to sell Bitcoin. We don't care about the dollar. We don't care about gold. We don't care about NASDAQ froth. We don't care about AI or scarcity or what currency robots are going to use. We don't care about anything. We care about this sort of reflexive loop that we're in, right? And everybody is afraid Saylor is going to actually get liquidated somehow, right? And this is very reminiscent of somebody tried to corner the silver market a long time ago. They tried to buy all the silver and squeeze all the shorts. And it's kind of what Saylor is doing. Like back then, they were using futures leverage. Today, Michael Saylor is using capital markets to try to get levered up as possible to get as much Bitcoin as possible. Now, in defense of Saylor, he can only raise money when Bitcoin is up. He can only buy the amount of Bitcoin that he wants after it's up and there are willing sellers. So he always buys the high. He always buys the high, right? And he knows that. He bought the high in 2021, right? His average price in 21 was 47. It went to 16. Now he's pretty much done the same thing, except he's done it with a lot more leverage. And of course, this whole idea started when he reported selling just 32 Bitcoin, right? Enormously symbolic. It means Bitcoin is now funding dividends, not new issuance. In other words, Bitcoin going up doesn't mean he can issue more shares. Now Bitcoin going up means he can peel some off to pay the interest, and that freaked people out. That freaked people out because strategy is like a leveraged Bitcoin credit machine that can behave like one during distress when it needs fresh capital, dilution, or Bitcoin sales to service the debt. This is the thing. Like, how does he service the debt? How does he pay his obligations? Like these people who own, like they just recently said, we're going to IPO, not IPO, but they're going to issue or sell more MicroStrategy shares, hurting people who already own the stock to pay dividends, to pay the STRC holders. It's, it's crazy, right? So what do you do? What do you do in this type of environment, right? STRC is broken. Like, where is STRC? Like, let's just put it up on the screen. Like, this is what is causing. If this doesn't stop, then Bitcoin doesn't stop. And if it does stop, that's when Bitcoin stops, right? So, I mean, you have, I don't know, you just have an absolutely unbelievable puke. This is the preferred stock. General public is panicking, sold it all the way down to 73. I mean, because again, and this is a fact, like Saylor actually brags about this, the people who own this in huge amounts is retail. All people who need fixed income, like, oh, I don't need to buy Bitcoin. And he said this, I don't need to buy Bitcoin. I just need something stable and get 11%. I don't need the volatility. No, the volatility is in this. Bitcoin's like 1%, 2%, 5%. It's not the Bitcoin of old. It doesn't behave like Zcash where it's like 5, 6, 10% all over the place. I mean, yeah, it's down and we're all depressed, but it's down 2% today, right? These stocks have been moving in 10% increments. Now, I mean, you got some Lux algo levels here. You got some reversal signals. This whole thing went to the discount zone, blah, blah, blah. But, good luck telling anybody this. Good luck explaining this is a 4-hour MicroStrategy chart. This should have stopped at 108. If we just go to MSTR 4-hour, again, hopefully this is helpful, right? We're trying to explain this whole thing, soup to nuts. This whole thing where Saylor stuff goes down is now affecting Bitcoin, where it used to be the opposite. I mean, this should have stopped at 108 MSTR. It's now at 87, right? And the only reason NASDAQ is up today is because this company, Micron, this is a 4-hour chart of Micron, right? Micron opened up on gangbuster earnings, went down, and it's come back, right? So the general public and everybody behaves absolutely the opposite when it comes to semiconductor stocks than it does to MicroStrategy. It's the inverse, right? It's semiconductor chips forever. We have a monster never-ending bid. Okay. Monster never-ending bid. And we have a monster never-ending debacle in these other stocks, which takes Bitcoin down with it. All right. So what do we have in Bitcoin? Well, we have, this is the Bitcoin daily chart. And, to be honest with you, I don't know, the Lux algo look gets kind of worse every day. I mean, right now, the only thing that's holding this up is this Lux algo automated trend line zone, around 58 along with the discount zone. But I mean, you failed at the 21-day moving average. You failed at this fib circle level. Now Lux Algo is inserting resistance above the market, just like it did up here. You know, the more it goes down, Bitcoin, seemingly the harder it is for it to come back, because now we have this Michael Saylor thing hanging over our head. Hanging over our head. And really, the only thing that's been working, like I said, for the YouTube member area, the only thing that's been working is small caps in the RWA area. That's it. And if you're not in baby caps, or if you're in any of these big caps, you're getting smoked. XRP now at $1.03, despite, you know, Ripple's stablecoin being approved for use in Japan. No one cares. This is this reflexivity loop. Crypto's lost half of its value in a world where everything else is 10xing. Like, if you say that to yourself, you will get depressed and sell, right? No, people will say crypto has no narrative, right? Any asset that acts like this is no good. I mean, this is the argument that's out there, right? In other words, like I said, it's not a real asset if it's not 10xing along with everything else. Now, of course, there's the obvious counter argument. You know, the US government has spent itself into insensibility. It has to start wars and hurt people in order to defend a currency that could come apart at any moment, regardless of whatever narrative they have going on now. You know, the narrative now is, oh, the dollar is king. The dollar is this. The dollar is that. Okay. No, it's not. Okay. You look at the DXY chart. Okay. You have the premium zone and you have a candlestick reversal going on here. And, you know, to this whole dollar wonderful thing, I say bullshit. Just wreck the stream. But that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm calling BS on that whole narrative. That what we're doing is we're assuming that Michael Saylor is the next FTX. That's what we're assuming. That, you know, if they push it down low enough, they can actually force him out. And it's, in a way, and you've probably heard this too, but I'm going to repeat it anyway, that Saylor is anti-Bitcoin. Strategy is anti-Bitcoin. Bitcoin is built to have no central point of failure. It's not supposed to have a central point of failure. It's decentralized, right? Bitcoin nodes are everywhere, miners are everywhere, and you can't take down Bitcoin by taking down any one entity, whereas Strategy is a company, right? They hold 5% of the Bitcoin, but, you know, they have debt, they have stock. The company theoretically could go out of business, could just blow up. Now, I think what Saylor is going to do, and this is the thing that has not been written about, but I think it's obvious that Saylor, in his heart of hearts, doesn't care about what happens to MicroStrategy or STRC holders in the short term. He doesn't care. He's like, I got to get my hands on as much Bitcoin as I can. I'm going to issue this stuff. If the stuff goes down, oh well. I got all the Bitcoin I could get my hands on, because he can't get his hands on any more Bitcoin right now. That's what he cares about. And he's assuming, looking at these debt instruments or his stock, that everything eventually comes back. In this case, honestly, I think you'd have to have Bitcoin at a new all-time high before his stock and STRC are decently recovered. Like, in other words, you know, this, and I don't know if I could pull it up, but what's happening to this debt instrument reminds me of what happened to junk bonds in 2008. Honestly, because in 2008, all the debt of like any like not so good debt completely crashed. Here it is. Yeah. So HYG is junk bonds. It's a junk bond ETF. Okay. And ironically, HYG never got back to where it was in 2007. It never went back there. It just went straight down on this crisis. This is junk debt, just like STRC is now junk debt. And it never went back. Despite, I don't know, everything is wonderful in the world. And they just wreck it. And if you look, unfortunately, if you look at MicroStrategy or strategy on a monthly chart, okay, trying to keep this in here for TikTok. Basically, this thing is sitting on Luxalgo support at 86. This was the high in November of 2021. So now you have Bitcoin, and this blows my mind. Bitcoin is now $10,000 below its 2021 high. And strategy has now reached where it was in 2021 November at the high in Bitcoin. So we have unwound everything and then some. And then some. I mean, this is the only argument, I think, for this to actually stop. Because, like Soros said, this reflexivity loop repeats itself until people realize that, hey, maybe this doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, that's the next point. So, I mean, does it make sense to assume that Bitcoin is going to 44K on Saylor distress alone? Like, retail's bought a lot of things and gotten smoked in the past. Retail is probably going to get smoked in some of these AI stocks, because they're not all going to win. They're not all going to win. I think AI got smoked. I'm sorry. The general public got smoked in Apple. The general public got smoked in Meta, at least lately, not long-term. So the general public has definitely got sucked in to SpaceX, which has got short sellers attacking it left, right, up, down, and center. So the general public has been smoked before. It hasn't ended the world. Here's SpaceX. And, the simple reality is Saylor dumped on everybody. He just dumped on anybody who would walk in like everybody at Bitcoin Vegas. And I've told this story before. You had to get there an hour and a half before he started talking to get a seat. And the place was absolutely jam-packed. It looked like a concert. Like every single seat was filled in this huge auditorium. To watch people, the one flag, I got to be honest, the one flag was that the deck for STRC looked like it was created with Claude by some intern. It didn't even tell Claude to, space out the wording. It was all kind of jumbled together, particularly the part where we would say if STRC worked and Bitcoin worked, then really, if STRC worked, it would help the people who own strategy stock. And that wasn't clear on the PowerPoint now that I look back and think about it. So is this a good reason to send Bitcoin to 44K? Nobody was talking. The only person I know that I watch, like I know Benjamin Cohen was on this. The only person who I know who was talking about 44K, ironically, was Crypto Princess. She was the only one who was like giga bearish when everybody was either neutral or, waiting for this thing to somehow bottom. Okay. It's like, the number of Bitcoin at a loss. This is a possible problem. You have 11 million Bitcoin are now held at a loss. Okay. While long-term holders control a record 14 million coins. I mean, like the losses here, the paper losses in Bitcoin at 58 or 60, is borderline. I don't know. It's like borderline catastrophic. And the question is, are these people going to puke out all this Bitcoin at 58? Or, has that happened already? Is there going to be one final panic? You can't say there won't be, because there could be one final panic in Saylor's instruments. That could be happening now. I mean, MicroStrategy is down 10%, and there's no sign of it stopping. I mean, this is like, the hedge fund sharks. MicroStrategy has no bid. STRC is being puked by retail, and my understanding is institutions are after SpaceX. They're shorting it. They're after SpaceX. Are they going to get squeezed out of SpaceX? Is there ever going to be a bid in MicroStrategy or STRC again, unless Bitcoin is well above 100? Like, I'm chatbotting this whole MicroStrategy thing, and I'm like, what saves STRC? Like, it's, take this with a grain of salt. Bitcoin would have to be Bitcoin at 100K does not save, in terms of a price point of view, does not save STRC. Does not. STRC might get the dividend, but the price won't go back to 100 unless you have some sort of major uptrend in Bitcoin. And, to state the obvious, this is an issue. Saylor is $14 billion underwater, and even more unbelievable, Tom Lee with Ethereum is $10 billion underwater. And, I'm not even going to go into it because you can't go into it. Like this reflexivity thing, I've tried to talk about it with the dollar, but you can't even talk about the positive case for Bitcoin. If you even say the word Ethereum, you get laughed. You get laughed at. I mean, I don't know. Ethereum is like, I don't even know what you could compare it to. It's almost like the Vitalik meme coin now. Everyone just laughs. Vitalik sold all his ETH to Tom Lee at 4,000 and continued to sell at 3,000 and 2,000. It's like, they got to write him a thank you card. Okay. Now, again, flipping it around, how far can they really sell some of these Michael Saylor instruments before somebody goes, maybe this is worth a shot? Like, this is what guys who buy junk do. Because, gold and silver, a bid has at least returned. Because, this whole idea that the dollar is going up forever, that Kevin Warsh, the Fed chairman, wants to hike rates 3 times, that is complete. That is wrong. He does not want to do that. He wants to cut rates. You seen this employment data this morning? Okay, so here's the good news. Applications for new unemployment claims are stable to falling. So some people are getting jobs. We don't know what kind of jobs, but some people are holding their jobs. But continuing unemployment claims are rising, meaning if you get thrown off, if you get thrown off the wagon. If you're unemployed, you're done. You can't find anything new. You can't get the old job back. And of course, with these tech layoffs, MYKU, says Bitcoin is below the rainbow chart. Okay. So I don't have the rainbow chart in front of me. Basically, it's kind of like got Bitcoin on like a parabola like this, right? And then, back in 2022, the FTX liquidation caused a breach of support on the rainbow chart. And the rainbow chart has been breached again and has been for a while. I believe Bitcoin comes down to what goes on with the Fed. Everybody calls it the 4-year cycle. Honestly, in 2018 and 2021, the Fed basically went on the warpath and started tightening. And that's what wrecks risk assets. That's what wrecks it, not some cycle. And right now, liquidity is way too tight. Too tight. I mean, people can't get enough dollars. Seriously, this is true. They cannot get enough dollars, right? They're not printing the way they were, and there's just I know this is unbelievable, but the reason the dollar is strong is just liquidity is too tight. There's not enough dollars out there. As unbelievable as that sounds, right? I mean, that can't sustain itself because of the amount of money that they're spending, but that's what's happening right now. Bitcoin is constrained because rates are too high. Period. If that changed tomorrow, you'd have Bitcoin back at 80. And NASDAQ is held up by FOMO, mutual funds, 401k, and Robinhood, who just come in every day and buy it like Micron. Like earnings come out, everyone takes profits, retail comes in, buys the dip, Micron goes back up. That's it. I mean, that's what the modus operandi is in equities. And crypto, to use a simple word, crypto has no sponsorship. It has nobody coming in and going, oh yeah, I'll take all this crypto, because you had all the guys who sponsor crypto, like your Tom Lees and your Michael Saylor, they have to buy Bitcoin when it's up, right? Once Bitcoin starts to go down, it loses sponsorship, which is why you can have these seemingly idiotic corrections on these seeming cycles. It goes down and there's no buyer. There's only buyers of Bitcoin when it's going up. It's this reflexivity thing, right? It's this reflexivity thing. A1 Rising said, do you just make this stuff up on the fly? No, not all of it. But there is some free form talking involved. Like, in other words, I get a theme and we pull up the charts and then we talk about it, right? SJ747 is here. A1 Rising says STRC can be saved by raising the yield for a month. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to try all kinds of things to save STRC, increase the dividend, do this, do that. I don't know that the market's buying any of this. And it's frankly, it is obvious that that's the problem. I mean, NASDAQ is up. Micron earnings were good. The dollar's down, right? The dollar is at least stable. Bond yields are full. Rates, not massively, but like rates aren't going up. Gold and silver have a bid and Bitcoin's down. And all of crypto is getting wasted because hedge fund shorts can just lean on it. What stops this? I don't know. And I've said this before. Michael Saylor can sell Bitcoin at 58 or 60 or whatever price, 54. He can sell $3 billion to an investment bank like Galaxy Digital, who will take it from him. Like, if Galaxy Digital knows that Michael Saylor can fund all of his obligations for 3 years, they know that Bitcoin's going to turn around and go up 30%. But he can't eat humble pie. Like, if he's got to sell Bitcoin, just sell it now. Sell it to a dealer at the lows who will be like, oh, okay, well, we'll take this and it'll go to 80 and we'll distribute it on the way up. Because if he comes out and says, yeah, we can fund the dividend, you're going to have all kinds of short squeeze. But he's not doing that. He's playing games. He's trying to issue more MicroStrategy stock. Just can't admit, okay, we didn't play this right. We're going to sell the Bitcoin now. We're not selling it at 44. We're not selling it at 33. You're not going to liquidate me. I'm going to raise billions. I'm going to trim my position, and that's it. That's it. We're good for 3 years. Have fun. Because you can't get me out now. Now, again, if that happens, it goes up. If that doesn't happen, I don't know. This BS can continue until the last person either pukes STRC or they just run out of gas on short selling. The short sellers just run out of ammo. Same thing with Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin 58. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They went, there was a geopolitical event. People died. The Marine Expeditionary Force was sent to the Middle East to land on an island with a bunch of guys in tunnels waiting for them with drones raining on their head. They actually talked about doing this. They sent those guys over there, and that was to save the dollar. I mean, wow. I mean, talk about making stuff up on the fly. Dude, I couldn't make that up. I couldn't make that up at all. At all. So, I mean, if you wanted to know what was going on, that's what's going on. And of course, to add to the indignity of it all, it's coming off from its highs this morning. And I guess this is indicative of the world we're living in. Remember the Bitcoin maxis going long Bitcoin, short the banks? Remember that? Here's BKX, the banking index, rising another 1% this morning. And here's Bitcoin crashing. Banks up, Bitcoin down. Everything that everybody thought this year was right, every fundamental idea, again, this is reflexivity. There were no fundamentals this year. Characters talking about $200 oil, wrong. Nobody thought gold was going to go to 5,000. It went to 5,000. Then it went to 5,000. Everybody said it would go to 10,000, and it went to 4,000. Silver went to 120. Everyone said it was going to 200. Then it turned around and went to 50. Nobody said NASDAQ could go up. It went completely parabolic. Like when this conflict started, and then it sort of like could go either way, or NASDAQ started to go up, and every article on Zero Hedge said, Goldman says, don't touch this. Goldman says a correction would be healthy. Straight up, Robinhood. Everything, and you know who said this? I'm telling you. Sometimes she's so sophisticated in the way that she does things. She told me a long time ago, she said, take whatever it is you think you know and throw it out the window, especially when it comes to intermarket relationships. Which is why, honestly, I mean, I still think this show has value. I think Crypto Princess's show has value. I think these guys at Stormrake have had their finger on the pulse of the market. Okay. They helped the channel. I just did. And we're going to have a new video coming out very soon. They are brokers that see the flows. They see the flows. There's nobody at Coinbase to call and go, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What's the mood? This is what they do. It's old school. Like I'm going to be honest with you. I actually think that these guys could morph themselves into like the Goldman Sachs of crypto. Like Coinbase thinks it's going to become the Goldman Sachs of crypto. They'd have to absorb a firm like Stormrake where they actually have the people. Galaxy Digital has people doing this. Stormrake could become another Galaxy Digital one day. That's why I'm doing business with them. Right now, it's a brokerage firm that has a lot of smart people, which is what my father used to do at Merrill Lynch from 1974 to 2000. My father took his stuff, sold it at the top of the dot-com bubble because they wanted to put a PC on his desk. He had a machine that would give him stock quotes, but when they handed him a PC, he was like, I think I'm going to hit the bid and go home and go to the pool. What a legend. And in 1974, when he started, it was so bad. As a random tidbit, in 1974, when my father started as a stockbroker, it's like crypto today. He couldn't get anybody to buy one share of stock. That's how bad the mid-70s bear market was. One of the worst bear markets ever. It wasn't a crash. It was just down, 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 down. His father was sick, and he would go to the hospital, and instead of cheering up his father would have to cheer him up. That's how bad it was. Does that sound familiar to you? Kind of does. Many years later, he hit the bid and walked out and wound up being okay. He didn't make $1 gazillion, but he was okay. He was okay. And, he walked away and said, okay, people, have fun with this. I'm done. And hopefully, as a couple guys on Twitter have hinted, this is what you have to live through to build wealth. This is the kind of stuff, right? Like, if Bitcoin goes to 250,000, Michael Saylor will be hailed as a genius, just like he was when Bitcoin was at 126. When Bitcoin was at 16K, he was just considered a regular moron. Now he's considered a risk to the whole ecosystem, possibly even to certain things in legacy, because it is the biggest preferred stock. It's amazing how the narrative changes. It's reflexivity. Let's welcome who's here. Of course, Bull Runner is here first on the stream, followed by Thomas Chai. Hello. Gary hitting those emojis that members get. Welcome. Okay. RDB is here. Welcome to the show. Right. Welcome to the show. Let's see who else we got here. Wing Raven in the house, giving love to the Spartans from Patreon, who have a new research piece that shows what could happen to Bitcoin if the dollar actually turned around, if the Fed continues to tolerate the dollar where it is, right? You know what I'm saying? A1 Rising is back. Welcome back, sir. Love having you here. Felix Cepeda. It's over, Bill. It's time to change jobs. This is the second, the second time I've been through this. The second time. In 2019, at the bottom, when I was with Ian Bellina, we were actually worried that there would never be another altcoin rally again. This was after the ICO boom, which, it made the .com IPO boom look like kid stuff. This would be like some coin would come out, random value proposition, no value proposition, 100x, 1000x. It was like the meme coin cycle, right? And there was never going to be another altcoin rally again. And then it was like DeFi, followed by layer ones, ETH, followed by NFTs. But we went from it's never happening again to Madonna and Tom Brady paying $600,000 for monkey JPEGs. And then in 2023, when everything went to zero, or 2024 and nothing was happening, Solana took off and it was meme 1000Xs. Right? Because nobody knew what Solana was. Nobody knew how to get on Solana. And whoever was on Solana caught this move. And yeah. Now, again, these things, they actually hurt crypto. They hurt crypto because it's scams, rugs. One guy said yesterday, crypto does make it difficult. You cannot be in this business or this space if you don't believe in things like sound money and what are AI machines going to use in the future. Everybody thinks AI is just like static thing. Like you stack up a bunch of chips, you build a machine, you build the data center, you buy the stocks and you just plug it in and that's it. That's it. Nobody thinks about what kind of things are going to come out of that. In other words, okay, we bought a bunch of chips, we built a bunch of stuff. Now what comes out? What thing or things come out of that? And how are they going to participate in finance? If you don't believe in that, if you don't understand that, then yeah, this is horrible. You're done. You're going to pack it in. As far as doing this for a living, yeah, dude, it's, these cycles are so brutal, right? At the top, it's okay. And at the bottom, I mean, look at the bags under my eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like I get it. It looks over, but I listen to Toby and I listen to the guy from Stormrake, Bisher. He was on MicroStrategy before everybody else. He had a Substack and we had a video before everybody else did on this STRC debacle. Most of that was driven by his research. Open up an account at Stormrake. The link is down below. I mean, we would love for you to consume our research and listen to Toby, but for God's sakes, people, if the guy doesn't have cred after calling this Michael Saylor thing, what has to happen? Seriously. SVJ says Bitcoin is going to 40K by October. Okay. Several people agree. Okay. Everybody has got orders in at 32 to 35K. Okay. I mean, those numbers are out there. I mean, those numbers were a joke 3 months ago. I didn't think Crypto Princess was crazy because her work was tremendous. Her work was great. And she had the TA. The Bitcoin ETF rally started at 35. And if you had the usual correction of like 70%, the target was 35. So if you went by the whole cycle thing, that's exactly what you would think. That's what you think, right? Niche fan says STRC is insane. Okay. A1 Rising points out that Bitcoin would be lower without strategy buying it. They've been holding it up, which is also true. I mean, you're right. You could have had a much more serious decline, a much more violent top. Okay. Everybody has a chart. Odd Dark is here. Yav is here. Members, welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate your support. Okay, yeah. Bucky 52,000 says, first they laugh at you, then they fight you, right? And then they call you a genius. Later. Right now, Saylor is in the laugh at you phase. And again, I don't know what stops that. SJ747 says Bitcoin down, Aave up. We didn't mention Aave specifically. The last stream, the last YouTube member show was about DeFi and trading. Okay. MSTR and BMNR need to collapse, and then maybe crypto can be adopted. Supermat is here from England, right? Honestly, I think the big players are after MSTR to sell their Bitcoin, says Hand of God 1973. And you know what? He is exactly right. The people who are attacking Michael Saylor at this time, and I've seen this, are long-term Bitcoin whales who sold at 126 who want to buy it all back. I would absolutely not doubt that Galaxy Digital, like on behalf of its huge multi-billion-dollar whales, is not sitting on all Michael Saylor's products trying to force some type of climactic liquidity event. That is hedge fund 101. Hedge fund 101. Okay. So here is the Bitcoin rainbow chart, courtesy of the Eagle King. So the last trip below the rainbow chart was FTX. And in the event that you were not around for FTX, there was legitimate concern that Bitcoin was absolutely dead. Okay. The purple area of the rainbow chart says it's basically a fire sale. FTX, just as a point of information, FTX, and not just FTX, but the liquidation of the entire crypto ecosystem. Luna, a stablecoin company. Celsius, a crypto bank. Right? FTX, a huge, huge exchange. That felt like the end of crypto. Like the entire system vaporized. Literally. They liquidated the entire crypto ecosystem. All of it. All the leverage in crypto was wiped out. And it looked like it was over and it was never coming back. It sat at 16K for 6 months. Right? The last time we were sitting on the bottom of the Bitcoin was sitting on the bottom of this rainbow chart. Is this as bad as FTX? Well, Saylor is the big levered player. Tom Lee's trade location is terrible. Bitcoin treasury companies bought the high. They may get liquidated, but that's not FTX. That's not the whole system. That's just companies that own Bitcoin going out of business. And by the way, where does their Bitcoin go? When these treasury companies, when someone goes out of business, where's their Bitcoin go? To the people who lent them money, who issued bonds on their behalf. The people who lent them money, they will get the Bitcoin. Take a guess as to who lent them money. Investment banks. Investment banks. So ironically, the people who issued the debt for the treasury companies are drooling that they go out of business and they get the Bitcoin at some ridiculously low price. Like, this is a game to force somebody out of business. It's so twisted after living through FTX. They actually want it to blow up. Now, a few things about that. Sometimes when you want it to go lower so you can buy it, that works if the person like Saylor is really hosed and can't come back. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that Saylor is SBF, but I think my closing note is we have to face the fact that right now Michael Saylor is the three-legged zebra in the lion documentary on a nature show, right? And the three-legged zebra cannot get away from the lions, or the three-legged wildebeest cannot cross the river without getting hit by the crocodiles. The crocodiles are after the three-legged zebra. And the only way that's going to change is if he pulls a stunt to turn this around. No stunt. They're going to walk in every day and they're going to do this. That's it. No one cares about the dollar. No one cares about anything, which is why I covered reflexivity. Somebody said you need to find a new job. I said you need to find a new theory. You need to find a new way for people to understand what's going on. There are a gazillion reasons to buy Bitcoin and crypto. Those reasons are not going to change no matter where Bitcoin goes. However, this charade that they've got going on, or this monkey show with Saylor, it is now the biggest problem in crypto, and it doesn't end until Saylor fixes it. And this is as old as the hill. Find the weak sister from the weak link and just lean on it. This is how hedge funds were created. Sometimes they do it with sovereigns. In 1992, they did it with currencies. in 2008. They made a movie about The Big Short. Now they're trying to make a new movie about Michael Saylor. This is the, this is the return of the Jedi of this type of action with hedge funds. That's probably how it will be. Remember. Okay. That is enough bloviating for today. Friends, we appreciate your business. Spartans, YouTube members, if you want some hope, some good ideas, and some stuff that's rallying, join us. And of course, don't forget to support our guys from Stormrake. We'll see you tomorrow.